Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today I'm doing one of my favorite videos that I've ever done. I'm super excited to do this video. I've been wanting to do this video for quite some time, but I wanted to get you guys the proper information. And as I say that, I forgot to get you guys one thing, so let me write it down here. But basically, this is how to build your own personal home lab. Now, I get this question a lot. How do you gain experience without actually doing a job or working or having a position or whatever? And I tell people, you can, in today's world, you can do it for next to nothing, right? And I wanted to prove that. So that's why this video is taking me so long to make, because I could have spun up a home lab and done it in a couple of days on AWS or Azure or GCP or whatever, but it would have cost me a lot of money, right? So to prove that you don't need a lot of money, I did it this way. So I've got my notes here because there's a lot of steps you have to do here to get to where I did finally, okay? So firstly, you got to have something to install Proxmox on. So if you don't know, VMware, if you've ever used VMware, it's a tool that allows you to stand up virtual machines. They used to have a tool called ESXi. It used to be free up until this year. When it was free, it was a lot like Proxmox, which I'm going to talk about. So Proxmox is a tool that allows you to virtually manage all of your virtual machines. So the reason this is so important is you can see this is the environment, right? Proxmox, you can see I have one Windows machine sitting here. It's not running. I have one Windows machine here that's a domain controller that is running, and then I have an Ubuntu machine here that is a template, meaning I can clone it and make as many Ubuntu machines as I want. Now, the reason this is so important is because you can see I can run a bunch of virtual machines. I'm only using 3% of my CPUs here, right? I'm only using 4% of my 64 gigs of RAM, and I'm only using 1% of my 4 terabytes. Now, some of you might say, whoa, 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 that you've got way too much stuff going on. Okay, so that's why I'm going to walk you through this process. We're going to build this lab up from the ground up with no knowledge before besides the fact of how to use a basic computer, okay? Sorry. So I want to go ahead and get started with some of the stuff I ran into. The first thing you got to do is you got to get a server. Now, if you have funds, this is going to be a lot easier if you do this in the cloud, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And when I say a lot, it depends on how many VMs you run and stuff, but you could set up this whole virtual environment in a cloud environment for relatively cheap, but it's going to cost you monthly. I didn't want that. I want this, so I'm going to show you guys. My hacking lab is 100% completely offline. So what that means is this looks like it's online here. You can see it's a local IP address. So what's awesome about this is my computer has 2 network adapters. One is Ethernet. It's plugged in directly to my internet, right? And then I have wireless. The wireless adapter is connected to this secondary hacking lab Wi-Fi. Now, that hacking lab Wi-Fi is offline, so if someone can't hack into it unless they're physically at my house, they can't do anything to it. They also can't access it. It's my personal fun lab that I get to hack into and do stuff. We're going to build this up over the course of, who knows how long this might go. It depends on how much you guys like it. So when we do that, I want you guys to follow along. That's my goal. So the first thing is get a server. How did I get a server? Many people ask me, okay, how do you get a server? I actually went to Marketplace, which is kind of like your Craigslist or whatever back in the day, and I found one for very cheap. This one I have here is a Z820, which is an old server. If you guys don't know, that's an older desktop server. It doesn't sit in a rack. It's just a desktop server. Excuse me. It's got 32 CPUs, and it actually has 64. I just only have 32 in there. It has, excuse me, it has 64 gigs of RAM and 4 terabytes of data. Now, many of you may say, okay, that's great. What does all that mean? This is the amount of hard drive that I can spin up computers and make them have. This is the amount of RAM that I can make them have. How fast can I make them run, right? And then the CPUs is how many processes can they run at a time, basically, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at. So what we had to do, the first thing we had to do is go buy a server. I bought one. Very cheap. I'm not going to tell you guys exactly how much because the guy kind of cut me a deal, but I finagled my way down. It was very cheap. I Local IT guy, nice guy, helped me out a lot. So you can find them on Facebook Marketplace. If you don't have the money, which again, very cheap to buy one, you don't need one with this much. This is a little bit overkill for what I'm going to do with it, but if you find one, great. You can also just use an old PC if you have. The big thing is you're going to want at least a little bit of RAM. The main reason you want a little bit of RAM is because you're going to want to basically be able to spin up a lot of VMs, and that's the goal. So that's the first thing. Now next, once I got that, bought the physical server, I had to find a location for it. It's sitting in a closet over here, plenty of airflow. It's great. So then I had to install Proxmox. So the server itself had it actually had Windows 10 on it, and when I went to Proxmox, if you go to Proxmox website, let me see if I got it pulled up here. Okay, here's one of them, right? So here's Proxmox website. This is their forum site, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But Proxmox.com, if you go to their website, you can download it and everything. It's great. They have good documentation, everything. So what this allows us to do is manage our VMs here. And I can spin up a ton of VMs. I can just sit here and spin up VMs, and I can have an entire network in here. This is how enterprise companies do this. Enterprise companies have large data centers with, you know, massive storage and everything, and they just spin up computers, servers, etc. That's what they do. So the reason I bring that up is because you're going to go to Proxmox.com and install the ISO file. Now, I installed 8.2.2, as you can see. If you have outdated hardware like myself, I did have outdated hardware, I don't recommend going straight to 8.2.2 because I ran into a lot of issues, and I'm going to discuss them so that you guys don't run into the same ones, because I saw a lot of them were pretty common. So first things, we've got our server, we've got our software, which is Proxmox. Now here's where the difference is, why we use Proxmox. Some people might ask me, why don't you use something like VMware? Why don't you just run Windows and then VMware on top of it or whatever? Proxmox is a bare metal hypervisor. What that means is it runs on the underlying OS, or I mean on the underlying hardware, meaning there's no operating system. This is the operating system. If I go onto my Z820 right there and turn on the monitor, it's just a Linux command line. That's it. And what's sitting on top of it is this. Okay, so there, it's bare metal, meaning it's directly in the metal, directly on the hardware. So that's one reason. It's much cleaner. It's a lot better. You don't have to do that. You can install Debian Linux and then put this on top of it. I don't necessarily recommend it if you have the capability of doing the bare metal. Now, I have a suspicion that a lot of you guys will run into problems and have questions. If you do, join the Discord. It'll be the link down there, and I'll try and help you, okay? Because a lot of these, I ran into a lot of issues because my server is older, okay? So, but I wanted to make sure I got a cheap one to show you guys that you can do this very cheaply. So, first things, we installed Proxmox. So what you do is you download the ISO file, and then I used a tool called Yummy, and I'll put the links in the video. I use a tool called Yummy. It's a very simple tool. You open it up, you point it to the ISO file that you just got. It makes it bootable. It makes it so that you can install it on the machine. So then I went to my server, and I just went to the BIOS settings. Every server is a little bit different. It might be the escape button. It might be F12, whatever the button is to get to the BIOS. When you get to the BIOS, you select, excuse me, we'll go right here and look at BIOS menu. And we'll just look at images so I can show you. So this is what a BIOS menu looks like once it loads. Let's see if we can find one here. So I don't know why it's all blurry, but these are the BIOS setting or menus. So when you get to a BIOS menu, you will look for something like this where it says Boot Manager. See how it says UEFI, boot sources, and it says boot manager, then this, whatever. You can do one of two things. You can change the order and boot from the USB first, or you can just go select the USB and boot straight from the USB. And that will be your ISO file that you just put on using the tool called Yummy. Okay. And again, I'm going to put that in there. That will make it bootable, meaning, okay, now you can boot straight to a actual OS. Then once you do that, you will run into a couple issues, and I'll show you. This is why I have all these tabs open, because I want to show you guys some of the issues I ran into. The first one, the first one is it's going to ask for an IP. Cool. Problem is most of you guys have DHCP enabled. So what that means is your IP is going to change every time. Okay. So this is just a cheap. I mean, I don't even remember. I've had this for years. I think I paid like $12 or something maybe at the time for this. This is a TP-Link Archer C54, super cheap router. Okay. It broadcasts Wi-Fi. That's all I need it to do because this is what everything on my hacking lab is connected to. Okay, you could use your regular router. I don't recommend it because you're going to be opening up a lot of vulnerabilities here. So I have this all off network. This is all on a separate network at my house on its own thing. Now what I did, you can see right now I have two things connected to it. And this is, if I refresh it, it's actually not two things now because this is the Linux machine that I had spun up earlier. But if I go to the DHCP, if I go to right here, the LAN, okay, and of course it's going to ask for my password. So first thing I had to do was get a router, get it logged in. The reason I'm doing this is because once I connected to the actual machine, right, I have to, or once I get the Proxmox, set up, I have to give it an IP during the setup. Well, you don't know what IP it's going to get assigned yet. So what you need to do is go to the DHCP server, and you can see I have an address reservation. This is going to be reserved, meaning nobody else can get assigned that. Now, you may say, but I don't know what server is going to get assigned this yet. Or, I mean, I don't know what MAC address yet. Well, you can do two things. One, you can try and get the MAC address, but you don't have to do all that. All I did was leave it alone until I put an IP address in there that I thought it might be. So go into your router and look at the first, you can see the address pool. The first one that it could be is 100. And I knew this was the first thing I'm connecting to the network. So if you have 5 things connected to the network and you think the 6th one's going to be your Proxmox, go ahead and guess, put your, right here, whatever the IP in line is. And then once it connects, you can see here it shows us the ones that are connected right now. So my Windows is actually connected right now on 101, and then there's 102 here. Now, the reason that's really nice, or that's really important, is because that 102 actually means that we can, or I'm sorry, that 101 and 102 are separate devices, but the reason that's really nice is because that means we can never assign this to anybody else. Proxmox will always get this address. That means it's static IP, basically, right? It's going to always assign it. So that's nice because now when I put the IP address into my Proxmox server during setup, it will always handle it. So, like I said, put what you think it'll be. If it's not that one, later, go to your router, look at whatever the MAC address of your Proxmox server is. This is after the install. After your Proxmox server, look at it. Whatever the assigned IP address is, just reserve it, okay? So reserve the MAC address of it to the original one you assigned. The reason I say the original one is because that's the one you're going to put into your Proxmox server when you install it. So for me, give you an example of kind of what I'm talking about. 192.168.0.100 is what I assigned it, okay? But I didn't have the MAC address yet. That's fine. I didn't have it yet. So what I did was I put it in the Proxmox during the install, let it run, did the install. It was not correct. So later it came down here and it was a different one. Let's say it was 102. Well, I went ahead and said, no, I want to assign this MAC address. See how I say add? I can say MAC address connected devices. I assigned that one the IP I wanted. I then disconnected it, reconnected it. When it reconnected, it came back and was given this IP. So that's how I got it to stay on the IP address. The reason you need that is because otherwise you're not going to be able to get to this console right here. Okay. Okay. Sorry. I'm still sick, so I had to blow my nose and stuff. But so I turned off my DC. No, it doesn't really matter. It was hung up, so I turned it off. But basically, so now we've got, you bought your server, you've downloaded Proxmox ISO, you've used the tool Yummy to actually set it up to be a bootable disk. When you plug that in and boot it from the BIOS menu, you're going to boot from USB. When that happens, it's going to ask you, it's going to walk you through some stuff. So we're going to go through and we're going to actually, I'm going to show you. Proxmox install guide. They have great documentation. One of the reasons I really like what they did. Now here's their documentation, okay, and you can see they tell you, and this will be in the description, so don't worry about the. But here's the ISO image. It just says right here, just boot from USB. Okay, that's great, but you need a something that'll make it a bootable USB. So that's why I used Yummy. Use whatever you want, right? And then it's gonna ask you for basic requirements. It's just gonna say, hey, you know, what's the IP address, the password. Make sure you know the password because that's the root password. If you lose it, you're gonna have to actually reinstall probably. There's other ways, but yeah, you don't want to lose that password. So set the password. Make sure you don't lose it. All that jazz. Excuse me, I was trying not to sneeze that whole time. So that's they make it seem like 3 easy steps. It's really a little bit more than that. But when I was installing, I ran into some issues. Okay, and that's what I want to talk about. So the first thing I ran into is, and I'm looking to see which one, because I ran into a couple of issues, and I've got it written down. So the first thing I ran into is I had to boot it into, if we can find it, let me pull that back up and show you. So we'll say Proxmox, and we'll say no mode set. So this, apparently this no mode set used to be a thing in version 7. Version 8 they took it out, but you can still use it. So mine was getting hung up. So you can see here, he says, I'm getting ready to upgrade to version 8, starting with my backup server, blah, 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 blah. But then I get a message on the screen that says, cannot display the video mode and nothing more seems to happen. I wasn't getting that. I was just getting it. It just got hung up. It was just getting hung up on, let me see if this is the one. Yeah, I was just getting hung up on, I don't even know what, but it was just getting hung up. And when it was getting hung up, I thought, man, it's not even getting to the boot menu. So if you're not even getting to the boot menu, it was really annoying. You can see here they say, if you go look at their information, it says there is a new no mode set option under the advanced. I didn't do that because this didn't exist in the advanced options under the boot menu if you go look. So I couldn't find that, didn't get it to work. So if you look, it says it was added with the later whatever, and then 8.1 says he doesn't have it anymore. So yeah, I only find the debug mode. They aren't there. Okay, there is no mode set. So what I had to do, there is a way to do it, and I'm trying to see if it was in here that I found it. Yep, right here, adding the no mode set kernel parameters. So this is their direct documentation on Proxmox, right? So I might have to do a control F here, no mode set. So here's what I had to do. Okay, so you can see it says right here, problems may, and this is why I recommend documentation. It's so good. Problems may arise on very old or very new hardware due to graphics drivers. Okay, that's what it was hung up on. Now that they say that that's what it was hung up on, it couldn't load the drivers. Every time I tried, it just got hung up. If you run into this is what you gotta do. Set the no mode set parameter. This prevents the Linux kernel from loading any graphics drivers. You may say, how do you do that? It tells you perfectly how to do it. On the VE bootloader menu, so when I plug in my USB and boot from the USB, I will install Proxmox VE terminal UI, meaning I'm going to install the UI but with a terminal as well. And instead of hitting enter, I press E to edit it. When I edited it, okay, I went to the end of the line that starts with Linux and I added no mode set. There's only 3 lines. It was very easy. I added no mode set, then I hit F10 to boot the configuration. This worked. Very easy, very simple. Got right past the driver issue. So if you run into driver issue, there you go. That's one thing, okay? So now, once that happened, okay, then we got to where, let's see if I can find this one. I would run it and it would install, and when it did that, it would actually get to a point where it says loading initial RAM disk, and that got stuck. So went back to troubleshooting, right? So that's what we do. So I went back to troubleshooting, and I found that what's happening is a little error here. So I recommend, if you want, you can do this, disable TPM and stuff, but I didn't find that TPM was causing issues anymore. But what I had to do here is, you can see, and this one I actually found in some of the logs, is this reference to vtoy, which is one of the installers. And what was happening is, this grub installer config was adding this rd init vtoy, and I was not using the vtoy installer. So what that means is I had to remove it. So I went to this file on the command line. So when you boot, you can go to command line, and I went to command line, and I just went to etc default grub installer.config, right? And then I just went straight to this line. So all I did, cd into this, nano this installer.config, just remove this part. That's it. Just remove that. That was it. All I had to do is remove it. Then run update grub and reboot. Super easy. It was not hard. It was super easy. You can see there's all kinds of articles on it. Very nice. It literally delete one line from the configuration file, and boom, worked great. Once it booted back up, or once it booted up, I have a all I'm going to see on mine, on my Proxmox server itself, all I see on the Proxmox server itself is the login screen, and it says go to HTTP 192.168.0.100 and then port 8006 to see your Proxmox server. At that point, I logged in to make sure my root account was still good, and then I made sure I came to my personal computer right here, connected to the network because I'm connected on two interfaces, and I went to the website. And look at that. This is what pops up. Now it's going to ask you to log in. When it asks you to log in, it's just your root account. So it's the same thing, root and then your password that you created during install. So the other thing you're going to need, okay, nope, that's good. From Etsy, okay. Sorry, just checking my notes. Got everything set up. Okay, so now we've got Proxmox set up. Now, if you have updated hardware, you're not going to have all those issues. Okay, so just know that. I had all those issues because I had outdated hardware, but I wanted to do it for the cheapest possible way to show you guys it can be done. If you have good hardware, you're probably not going to run into any of these issues. So I'll put in some of the description, some of the issues I ran into. I'll put in the links for them, so if you want to follow them. Most of it was just a lot of troubleshooting, though. And once I've found out most of the issues, it was pretty easy to fix, honestly. So now Proxmox is up and running. And look, when you get started, you're going to set up, all you have is really this data center, Stuffy24, and then local and local. Now, the first thing I did was I go over here to right here, local, and I look at ISO images. Now you can see I have 3 in here. So this one, this is my server or my domain controller. Okay. This is my Windows 11, just regular PC, and this is my Ubuntu. So all I did was go in here and I upload the ISO file, right? I download the ISO file from the proper websites. I upload them here. I could delete them off my computer now. They're running on my server now. What that means is they're just sitting on my server. I can now spin one up anytime I want. So what can I do? Here's a Windows machine, right? Here's my domain controller, whatever. I can just go ahead, just like VMware. If I wanted to create a VM, I can click Create VM. I can say the node is right here, the data center, the ID, the name of it, go to the operating system, and look, I can select any of those. I can make it an Ubuntu, Windows 11, whatever I want, and then spin a VM up very, very easily. It's very simple. So now I'm going to show you just an example. Then what I did, and I'm going to do that with these once I get them completely set up, is I actually went in here, went to Stuffy DC01, Windows, whatever, and they're not set up yet, but the Ubuntu is. See how it's got a little different icon? That different icon is actually because you see it says clone. I made this into a template. What that means is if I want to spin up another Ubuntu server with the exact same root account, the install is already complete, all of that, I just click on here and I clone it, and boom, I start it up and I have an Ubuntu server ready to go. It's already installed, it's already done. and I'm going to do that with the Windows machine as well. Once DC01's done and built, I'll have the domain controller built. I'll have the Windows machines connected to the domain, and we'll actually have a working hacking lab started, right? Now, one thing I wanted to show here is, let's just go ahead and start this up, the Windows machine. Now, I don't think it's actually this Windows machine actually works, so we'll start up the DC. So we'll let that run. It'll take a second to run. But one thing I wanted to show is, for one, you can access all of them here, but you can also just RDP into them, right? Because they're on the network. So what I want to show you here is, you can see here, if we refresh this and we go to, okay, got to put my password in again. And we go to our list, you can see here's one and here's one, right? So right off the bat, we have 2 machines basically, right? Cool. Well, what's the big deal about that? If we stand up our Ubuntu server, for instance, if you actually stand up and look, you would actually see that it's taking IPs, it's getting them, it's becoming part of the network, which is really nice. One thing I wanted to tell you guys too is, if you run in this issue also, if you go to start it and it says here that you'll get an error down here, and that, if I can find that error, here's the error. It says error nope, not quit. It'll be a KVM error. There it is. If you get a KVM virtualization error, all you got to do is go into options over here and KVM hardware virtualization, disable that. That's it. That's an easy one. That's all you got to do. But you can see here, it tells you how much it's using, all that stuff. And then as we do that, we go here and we now see that we're actually using more of our stuff, right? So that's really, really nice to see. You see all the usage, you see everything. So this is, you can see we can add certs, DNS, hosts, all that stuff later. We're going to build everything out. We're going to build a whole lab out. But I want you guys to be able to follow along. So if you have simply any hardware laying around that you can spare, right? Install Proxmox on it, on the bare metal, meaning use it a USB, YUM, all that stuff, and then go that route. Get it set up like this. Don't have to install anything yet, because I'm going to install a domain controller and get it built with you guys. That'll be the next video. We'll build the domain controller, we'll get it built out, and then once it's built, we will actually start adding stuff to the domain, right? So if this is something you guys want to see, let me know. This is a way to make it very affordable for everybody to have a hacking lab. Our lab, I have a lot of plans for this lab. It's going to have IoT devices and everything else. So we're going to have a very big lab to hack into. The big thing, though, is I want to make sure that you guys can follow along. I know we kind of went through a lot here, and I didn't go through the install of Proxmox. The main reason I didn't go through the install is because I did it on a different server, and I wouldn't have been able to record it. I would have had to use a capture card, which I have, but it would have been a very, very difficult thing to do, because setting up the capture card and when I was already having graphical issues, I had to use basically all command line. Would have been very difficult to do. So if you're running into issues with Proxmox, or if you guys want to see the install of Proxmox, I can spin up a VM and install Proxmox just to show you the installation process. But it's very simple. It just walks you right through it. The only thing you need is the IP, host name, all that stuff. And you could change all that later if you needed to, but it'll ask you that during setup. So let me know what you guys think. This is going to be a very big lab. It's going to be a lot. I want it to be a point where it's a whole hacking lab. I don't have to hack the box, all that stuff, right? I can just spin them up here, make videos for you guys. If a new attack comes out, guess what? I spin up an Ubuntu machine, set up the new attack, boom, there we go, we're done, right? The other nice thing is, because I am dual nicked here, I can just stay connected to this network, and it's never online, but I can stay connected to it and still use my computer. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys have any questions, because it's easy for me to say certain things are easy when, I have the years of experience built to troubleshoot and things like that. So if anything doesn't make sense, let me know, and I'll make a much deeper video on those aspects. The point of this lab is to make it usable by everybody. So I want everybody to, when I say usable, I mean you're going to use your own lab, but I want everybody to be able to build their own. So let me know what you guys think. please, 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 please like this video and comment on whatever you want to see, because this is something I'm very passionate about and I talk about all the time people need to do, and people kind of always look at me like I don't know how to do that. I want to show you how to do it. So this is the first step: installing Proxmox, getting some virtualization set up. Otherwise, you're gonna have to buy a single individual machine for every single one you want. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys like the video. Thanks, guys.